assembled company, welcome to the World Storytelling Cafe. And tonight we have live from way up north, probably in the middle of the Irish Sea somewhere, is the amazing, the fantastic, the phenomenal Liz Weir.
Well, thank you, John. With a build up like that, how could I go wrong? So I'm really looking forward to coming to Marrakesh on Sunday. But until then, I'll just share a few stories. It'll be interesting to see who comes on to listen. Hello, Emily. Hello, Christine. How are you? Those are my friends in County Tyrone have joined us, just joining on audio. There's Emily and Christine. Emily makes the most fantastic jam, John. Honestly, gorgeous jam. But anyway, I'm going to share some of my favorite stories. Because it's programmed as a children's storytelling session, I'll do a lot for children. I'll throw in a couple of ones for older people as well. But it's lovely to see nice faces from people in County Tyrone. And I think they maybe missed me saying what good jam Emily makes, but she makes fantastic jam. She's happy about that. Anyway, so John, by the way, Christine is in Marrakesh, where I'm going on Sunday, and Dee is from Australia. She's in Marrakesh as well. But the story I'll start with is a story from last week. I live on the top of a mountain in Northern Ireland, on the top northeast coast of Ireland. It's 5 miles to the sea, it's 14 miles to Scotland. And at night, when I look at the weather forecast on the TV news, I don't look at the Irish weather, I look at the Scottish weather because I tend to get that. And last week, we got a lot of snow. So I'm going to tell you a story from Norway. Since this is the World Storytelling Cafe, I'm going to tell you a story from Norway about how the snow got its color. You see, a long time ago, everything got a color. The sky was blue and the grass was green and the soil was brown, but the snow didn't get any color. It was clear. So when it came down and hit people, people were going, rain, rain, rain. Does it ever do anything except rain in this country? And the snow said, I'm not the rain, I'm the snow. I need a color. So he thought, where could I get some color? And he saw the flowers. And of course, flowers have lots of colors. So he went first to the red rose and he said, excuse me, red rose, can I have some of your color? And the rose said, why? Well, if I was red, there'd be red in the trees and red in the hills and the whole world would look bright. No, said the rose, no. People see me, they think, summer, go away, you're making me cold. So the next flower he went to was a beautiful yellow flower, which was a yellow daffodil. Excuse me, yellow daffodil, can I have some of your color? Why, said the daffodil. Well, if I was yellow, there'd be yellow on the trees and yellow on the hill. Listen, said the daffodil. People see me, they think, great, the winter's over, the spring's here, the daffodils are out, go away, you're making me cold. And he was just giving up, was the poor snow, when he saw a tiny little white flower and he said, excuse me, little flower, can I have some of your color? And the little white flower said, why? Well, you see, if I was white, there'd be white in the trees and white in the hills. It would be so bright, you'd know it'd been snowing before you even opened the curtains in the morning. And the white flower nodded and some of the white came off. And the snow came down white. The snow was delighted. He says, thank you. You've been so kind to me. I'd like to be kind to you. From now on, no matter how cold it gets, the frost will never bite your petals. No matter how hard the ground gets, you'll be the first tiny flower of spring. And ever since then, I'm sure Emily's guessed, that flower is called the snowdrop. And if you look up under a snowdrop, you'll see a bit of green. And that's where she shook the colour off and gave it to the snow. And for people that don't know about snowdrops, that's a picture of a snowdrop there. And we're just starting to see them now. You're just starting to get them. So that's how the snow got its colour. One of my favourite stories. One of the things I love when I do tell stories is remember the people who gave me the stories. I'm going to Marrakesh. I'm going to be working with some of the older storytellers there who've had the stories handed down and handed down and handed down. Well, I'm a wee bit the same. I've had stories given to me. The next story I'm going to tell you is an Irish story, but nobody will ever guess where I got it. I got it in Northern California, a long way from home. And the lady that told me it was called Catherine Fairley. And sadly, Catherine's no longer with us, but I love to think of her when I tell this story. And this story is about two girls who were best friends. One was called Bridget and the other was called Mary. And you never saw two girls so different. Mary was always good. If her mother said come home at 6, she'd come home at 6. If her, maybe at 5:45 even. If her mother said wear your blue dress, she'd wear a blue dress. But Bridget, oh dear, dear. If her mother said come home at 6, she might come home at 6:30. If her mother said wear your blue dress, she'd wear her red dress. That's just the type of girl she was. And yet the two of them got on very well together. They lived near the sea and they loved to go down, play on the beach and play in the rock pools, and they would hunt for crabs and shells. But one day they were down on the beach and Mary noticed the sun going down. She said, Bridget, we have to go home now. It's late. No, I don't want to go home yet. Would you come on? Come on now. And they started walking up the cliff path away from the beach when all of a sudden it was Mary who stopped and said, shh, listen, can you hear it? I thought we had to go home. She said, come and look. And they looked between the rocks, and there, sitting on a big rock, was a lady with long hair right down her back. The dress she had on her was all the colours of the sea, blue and green and grey and silver. She had seashells on her hair. She had seaweed around her neck. And when they looked, they couldn't believe it. She didn't have legs or feet. She had a tail because she was a mermaid. Correct, Emily. She was a mermaid. Mary said, you've a lovely voice. Oh, the mermaid was really shocked. She wasn't used to people talking to her. She was used to people trying to steal from her or take her away. Thank you, she said. Well, you have, said Bridget. Please sing some more, said Mary. And the mermaid sang happy songs, sad songs, songs of shipwreck, songs of rescue. And as she sang, the sun went down and they noticed something glinting in her lap. When they looked, she had all these jewels, pearls, rubies, diamonds, emeralds, all the treasures of the sea. She had rings and bracelets. She had earrings and necklaces. She said, girls, time you were going home, but I want to give you a present to take with you. And she lifted a bag of spun silver thread, and into it she put pearls, rubies, diamonds, emeralds, one for Mary, pearls, rubies, diamonds, emeralds, one for Bridget. And she said, girls, these are gifts that mustn't be opened before you go home. And these are gifts that must be shared with your whole family. Now don't stop on the way home. Oh, thank you, said Mary. Thanks, said Bridget. And off they went home. Halfway home, wouldn't you know, Bridget stopped. This bag's empty. This bag's light. There's nothing in this bag. I'm going to look. No, said Mary. Don't. She said not to. But Bridget just tipped up the bag and out came a stream of silver sand. Told you it was a trick. Open your bag. Mary said, nope. And she ran for home. And when she ran into her house, there was her mummy, her granny, her baby sister, her big brother. Her daddy was a fisherman. He was out at sea. She tipped up the bag and out came pearls, rubies, diamonds, emeralds, all those treasures. And she explained about the mermaid. And she explained how this gift must be shared with the whole family. So they bought a new fishing boat for her daddy and his brothers. And they made quite a lot of money. It was in the days when there were more fish. And then they sold the fishing boat and they built a restaurant up on the cliff top where they sold all the beautiful fish and seafood. And they called that restaurant the Mermaid's Gift, for that was what it had been. And that's the story. When I tell that quite often in schools, children love to draw the pictures and draw the color hair that the mermaid might have. Some people give her green hair, some people purple, some people blonde or black. So that's the thing about a story. When you tell a story, everybody, no matter where they are, everybody can see their own pictures in their head. So I really like that one. But you know, because I told you that one, I'm going to tell a story for some of the older people who are on, though I think, Emily, you like it as well. And this story was told to me on a place called the Isle of Man. If you look at a map of England, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales, you'll see in the sea between Ireland and Great Britain a little island. And it's called the Isle of Man. People often go there to race motorbikes. But one of the first stories I ever heard when I was growing up was how the Isle of Man got formed. Because in Ireland, we had a giant, huge man called Finn McCool. He was forever fighting the Scottish giant. One day he scooped up a handful of soil, threw it across to Scotland, and it missed, and it landed in the middle of the Irish Sea, and it became known as the Isle of Man, where he scooped up the soil, filled up with water, and that became Loch Ness, a big lake that we have here. But that's not the story I'm going to tell you. That's just a little piece of background information. I was telling stories on the Isle of Man Storytelling Festival, and a man came up and said, I have a true story for you. I love true stories. I said, tell me it, and he told it. And I said, will you get up and tell it to the audience? He said, oh, no, I couldn't. I said, oh, please. And he told it. And I'm going to tell it to you. And this is told now as a true story. The Isle of Man is an interesting place because, like Irish people, people in the Isle of Man really believe in fairies. There's places when you're driving along, you have to say hello to the fairies. Now, these aren't your Tinkerbell, these little flitter. No, Irish fairies and Isle of Man fairies are a bit tricky. They can do all sorts of mischief. But here's the story. Years ago in the Isle of Man, there was a big storm, and all the fishing boats were in Peel Harbour. It's one of the big harbours there. And the fishermen had nothing else to do except sit around the hotel, eat and drink and talk, tell stories. And an old man used to come in every night, an old local man, and he would tell stories of the fairies. He would tell about enchantment. And the fishermen were laughing at him behind his back, which was terribly rude. And one day, one of the fishermen said, if you're so well in with these fairies, why not ask them when we're going to get our boats out? Because the weather's so bad, we're losing money. And the old man took it very seriously and said, I'll ask them. They were all laughing. They'd all seen the weather forecast. The storm wasn't going to go down for days. But the next day, the old man came in and he said, well, I had a word with the fairies and they say that tomorrow morning the weather's going to be good. You can get your boats out. And they went, He said, there's just one thing. Whatever is the biggest fish you catch, please throw it back for the fairies and that'll keep them happy. Well, they're all going, this guy's crazy. But the next morning, believe it or not, the wind had dropped. The sea was as smooth as a mill pond. It was really calm. And so the two boats set off, the two fishing boats. One was called the 147, which people maybe know as a score in snooker. And the other one was called the Maasai Warrior. Now, the Maasai Warrior stayed close to the coast of the Isle of Man, whereas the 147 went far out into the Irish Sea. And this wasn't that long ago, maybe 20 years ago. They were on their walkie-talkies to each other, telling each other how they were doing. And there were plenty of fish. This was before the fish got less. Plenty of fish. And in fairness to them, every time they got a big fish, they threw it up in the hatch cover so that when they finished, they'd throw the biggest fish back for the fairies. Everything was going really well until they got down to the bottom layer of fish on the 147. And there was a fish called a turbot. Now, I don't know if anybody online here knows about fish. But the turbot is a great big fish and a very, very expensive fish if you're going into a restaurant to buy it. So there they were. What to do? Would they throw this turbot back or would they keep it? Now I'm going to look around the audience and see what do you think. Thumbs up for throw it back, thumbs down for keeping it. What do you think? Let's see. Well, anybody with any sense, there's one up, one down. Anybody with any sense would know they should throw it back. Yeah. But they decided to keep it. They threw in a couple of big plaice, and as soon as they did that, the sea started to boil up and the wind started to change and the fishing boat was turning, trying to get back before the weather got worse. They were on the walkie-talkies to each other. The Maasai Warrior was able to slip into Peel Harbour, but the 147 was too far out, couldn't make it back to the Isle of Man. So there is a place there called Fleetwood in Lancashire Port. And people who know about this place know there are sandbanks there, and they know about the tides there, and they know that only at certain times are ships able to get in there. This was not one of those times. And the 147 ran aground on the sandbank. had to call Mayday, 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 and they had to be rescued. The crew were rescued. The ship was left in the sandbank, and although nobody died, the ship never sailed again. She broke up in that sandbank. And the man who told me that story, and he says it's a true story, his job was to go on a ferry called the Lady of Man from Peel from the Isle of Man to Fleetwood. And he said whenever he was on this boat telling the story, he'd point over and you could see the wreck of the 147 there. So the message in that story for anybody listening is, don't try and trick the fairies, because it never works. And that's the story. I hope you liked it. One of my favorite stories. There's my friend Norman Perrin. There's my friend Norman Perrin. My goodness gracious, hasn't set off yet for Marrakesh. Be lovely to see him. That's the lovely thing about the Marrakesh International Storytelling Festival, with its theme this year of Beja, which means joy and healing. Not only do we hopefully heal people with our stories, but we have great joy in the company of other storytellers from all around the world. And that's why I'm telling some stories tonight from different places, not just from Ireland. I did a book some years ago, The Mermaid's Gift is in it. It's called Here, There and Everywhere, Stories from Many Lands. And it's dedicated to a lady called Nancy DeVries. Nancy DeVries was a storyteller who lived in Michigan in the United States. And I used to go over and tell stories in schools over there, and she used to come over and tell stories in schools here. And she had some Indian heritage. She had some Dutch heritage. You know her name, De Vries. It's a Dutch name. And she had wonderful stories. So two of the stories in my book I got from her. And one I told with her permission, and I put it in the book with her, well, in memory of her. And when I'm doing it in Northern Ireland, again, maybe Emily could help with this one, I say to children listening, now, there's a sort of riddle of this. You have to guess what the animal is in the story. But here's the clue. We do not, repeat, not get this animal in Northern Ireland. And they start guessing before they even hear the story. But you have to hear the story first. This story happened in America. And again, because Norman's in Canada, he'd probably know about this story as well. A long time ago, in the forests of North America, there was a strange looking animal. He was covered from the tip of his nose to the tip of his tail in long, white, silky fur. And as he walked along, he'd say, oh, I'm so beautiful. Oh, I'm so lovely. He would stop and look at himself in ponds. There's boys do that sort of thing. But anyway, and as he was coming along, he felt a bit hungry. And he looked up and he saw a mother owl fly out of her nest. And he thought, happy days, food time. So he climbed up the tree, and in the tree, in the nest, were 3 baby owls. And he picked one up and said, ugh, you are so ugly, and I'm so beautiful, I wouldn't even eat you. Dropped it back, climbed down the tree, and off he went. Well, that was all right, but when the mother owl came flying in with her mouth all full of nice tasty grubs and worms, she heard sort of awful noise. And baby owls make awful noises. Horrible noises. And she said, what is wrong? An animal came and he said we were ugly. He said, what? You're not ugly, you're beautiful. You're mummy's wee pets. Who said that to you? An animal with white fur. Right, she said. I know just who you mean. Eat up your grubs and worms. Mummy has to go for a message. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever seen a really cross mummy. I asked this in school the other day and all the teachers went, yeah. Especially a mummy where somebody said something about one of her children. Oh my goodness. Dear Christine wouldn't have that at all. Well, that owl, she said, I'll be back. And she flew out of her nest. She was so angry. She flew down. She saw that creature and she grabbed them. And owls have got great talons. I'm sure you've seen them, Harry Potter and the like. She thought, what can I do with him? And she found a place in the forest where there'd been a big campfire and all the ashes were black. So she pulled him through the hot ashes this way. She turned him over. She pulled him through the hot ashes this way, and she dropped him into a pond. Shh. When he came out, from the tip of his nose, the tip of his tail, his fur was singed black. From the tip of his nose, the tip of his tail, his fur was singed black. And the only bit of white was a stripe going up the middle of his back. And ever since then, I'm sure Norman can tell us this, ever since then, the animal's been called what, Norman? Can you tell us? Wait till we hear.
Yes.
What do you think
His reputation stinks to this very day. He's called a skunk.
He's called a skunk. Norman got it in one. And that's the smell that the skunks make, the smell of that burnt fire. Now, I was telling stories on Prince Edward Island in Canada. And the two dogs belonging to the house, they got skunked. And there was only one way to clean them. And again, I asked this in schools. Some people know it, some people don't know it. If you know it, you know it. They say, if you know, you know. If you don't, you don't. How to get rid of the smell of a skunk? You wash them in what we call tomato juice, what the Americans call, Baba C would call it tomato juice. Hello, Baba C, how are you? Tomato juice. So we had to wash these dogs in tomato juice from the smell of the skunk. So that's the story, how the skunk got its smell, but I don't call it that in the book. And I'm sure you know, Emily, why I wouldn't call it that in the book. Because if you called it how the skunk got its smell, everybody would know what the story was about before you ever told it. So I call it Mother Owl's Revenge. And there's Mother Owl. And the thing about those baby owls and the noise they make, our friend Colin Irwin, who's not coming to Marrakesh this year because he's around the Taj Mahal as we speak, he has owls. And he used to fly owls and demonstrate owls. And about 3 years ago, he had 2 baby owls, and you never heard the noise of them. They actually look like tiny dinosaurs when they've got no feathers on them, and they make this horrible, horrible, horrible noise. So I can see why when I'm telling that story and the baby owls are making that horrible din, the mother owl wants to stop it as soon as possible. So that's Mother Owl's Revenge, dedicated to my late friend Nancy de Vries, who was a really, really good storyteller. Thank you, Norman. Thank you for your help, Norman. That was very good. Lovely to see you, Babasy. Is that Donald Nelson? Is it really? I wonder, is it? Is it? I think it might be. I think it might be. Might be. Anyway, the story I want to tell you next, we'll do something different. We'll go to Ireland. When I ask children for questions after I tell stories, I mean, they'll say things like, do you like telling stories? And I always say, always better to ask a question that gets you an answer that isn't yes or no. You could say, what do you like best about telling stories? And one of the things I like best about telling stories is remembering the people that have told me the stories. The next story I'm going to tell you was told to me by a man called Johnny Collins. And Johnny Collins was an Irish traveller. In the olden days, people called them tinkers, or they called them gypsies. They don't want to be called gypsies. They don't want to be called tinkers. They are Irish travellers. And John was an Irish traveller who sadly wasn't able to go to school when he was a boy. In those days, traveller children didn't go to school. And he wasn't able to read and he wasn't able to write. But oh my goodness, what a brilliant storyteller. So he'd never told stories in public before, but I brought him up to Belfast and he told stories at the library. And whenever we teach storytelling, as many of the storytellers on will know, we teach them about presentation skills and how to talk. But no, John didn't do any of that. He just closed his eyes and rocked when he told his stories. And he was absolutely fantastic. So here's a story I got from the late Johnny Collins. Oh, the other question I want to put in. Children also say to me, what's your favorite animal? I don't know if, Christian, you should know what my favorite animal is because you've got one. And I think, well, you've got many animals, but a pony or a horse. Here's the story. Jack was a poor boy who lived in Kilkenny, the city of Kilkenny, which is way south of Dublin. But he lived long ago when there were kings in Ireland. And Jack didn't get on too well with the other boys and girls of his own age because he wasn't good at reading and he wasn't good at writing. Now, that didn't mean he was stupid. He just never had a chance to learn. But Jack had gifts that no other boy or girl had. He could look after any animal, he had just a touch. But when it came to horses, oh, he could take the wildest horse and gentle it. Talk about horse whisperer. He was fantastic. So when Jack was a teenage boy, his parents thought he should have a horse of his own. But of course, I told you, they weren't rich. And so all they could afford was a really sickly, thin little foal. And everybody said that foal was surely going to die. But Jack sat up with it night after night, gave it these drenches, these drinks, and finally it grew into a fine young black horse. When it was old enough to have shoes put on its feet, he had to go to the blacksmith. And the blacksmith was in at the king's castle. And when he got to the castle, All he could see were soldiers running this way, soldiers running that way, swords drawn, shields to the ready. And Jack said, "What's going on?" They said, "Read the notice." And there on the wall was one of those royal proclamations, the sort of curly writing that you get in Shrek. Well, Jack couldn't read it. And he said, "I can't read it. Tell me what it says." "You're stupid," they said. "You're stupid. You can't read." Jack said, "I'm not stupid, but I'd really like to know what it said." So they said that a kind person told him what it said. It said the King of Ulster, up where we live, had come down to the south of Ireland and had kidnapped the King of Leinster's daughter. And her father was going to give 5 bags of gold and his daughter's hand in marriage to anybody who could go up there and get her back. "That's a job for me," said Jack. People said, "Are you joking? Do you know the sort of people live up in the north of Ireland? They'd fight with their shadow. And how are you going to get there? It's a long way." Jack said, "I have a black horse. He'll take me there." And he jumped on his horse and he rode over hill and over dale till he came over the brow of a hill, and as far as the eye could see was a bog, a marshy place that even a bird couldn't land on without sinking. And Jack just spoke out loud and said, "How am I going to get across this?" All of a sudden, a voice spoke. It said, "Reach into my left ear, Jack." He looked around, couldn't see anybody. "It's me," said the horse. "You helped me when I was sick. It's my chance to help you. Reach into my left ear." And he put his hand forward into the horse's left ear and pulled out a stone. "Throw it in front of you," said the horse. When he threw the stone in front of him, a hard straight road went right across the bog, and Jack was able to gallop on his horse right across. Guess what? There was a castle, and there was a tower, and there was a white hanky waving out of the tower. It was the princess. But how was he going to get her down? No long hair in this story wouldn't work. Jack said, "How am I going to get her down?" The horse said, "Take a hair from my tail, Jack. Don't try this at home." And he went, tweak, pulled a hair from the horse's tail, threw it in front of him, and a silken horsehair ladder came down. And Aoife, who was a perfectly capable girl, that was her name, Princess Aoife, she climbed down all by herself, hopped in the back of Jack's horse, and off they galloped. But the king's men were after them, and it's a long way from Kilkenny up north and back down, and the horse was getting tired, and he said, "Reach into my right ear." And Jack put his hand in the horse's right ear, brought out a piece of turf, threw it in front of me, and the minute the turf hit the ground, down into the bog went the King of Ulster's men. Jack brought the princess home. Father was delighted, gave him 5 bags of gold. Jack said, "Excuse me, hello, was there something about your daughter's hand in marriage?" The king said, "Do you think I'm going to let my daughter marry the likes of you, who couldn't even read a notice on the wall?" The princess said, "Wait, father. Jack has proven he's clever, he's courageous, he's kind, he keeps his word, and I'll thank you to do the same." Anyway, she said, "I like the look of him." So that's how Jack, the poor boy who couldn't read or write, married a princess. And Johnny Collins, the man that told me that story, said, "Great message for people in that story. Never call anybody else stupid." And I hope you like that one. One of my favorite stories, because I can see pictures in my head. I can see the horse galloping. I can see the road, and you can make a lovely. I often get people, might do that in Marrakesh, get people to do a map of that story. You can see it all happening, because that's how storytellers learn stories. They see pictures in their heads. At least most of them do. I can see pictures in my head, and then it's like that. We have a program on TV here called Catchphrase. You say what you see. So as I'm telling you a story, I'm seeing it and I'm saying it, and that makes it very useful. How are you getting on? Everybody doing all right? Donald doing all right? Norman doing all right? Everybody doing fine? Great. There we go. King Louis doing fine. Great. That's fantastic. And there's the people, I presume that's the cafe up there in Morocco. That's great. One of the things that I love, I mentioned before, there's them all. We're looking around the room. Oh, very good. Oh, look, there's a lot of people there. Welcome, welcome. A lot of the things that I like about storytelling, not just the idea of who told me the story, but also a sense of place. Now, I mentioned to the people who are here at the beginning, I live in the top northeast corner of Ireland. And yesterday, I just let her go today, we had a Turkish storyteller who's coming to Marrakesh with me, Senem Donaton. And she came from near Istanbul, and she married an Irishman. She's living in Dublin. But yesterday, what I like to do with my storytellers is take them out, take them into nature, tell them stories of where they are. So yesterday, I took her not to my village and then to the next village, and I told this story. And the story goes like this. The village beside us has a river flowing through it. And years ago, a girl was walking along beside the river when she saw a tiny, tiny little woman washing an even tinier pile of shirts, little tiny shirts like this. And she said to the woman, "What are you doing?" And the woman said, "Well, these are the war shirts of the fairies from our glen. There's a big battle over in Scotland tomorrow, and I have to get their shirts ready." And the girl said, "But if the battle's in Scotland, how will I know who won?" And the little woman said, "Well, wait until this time tomorrow, come back again and look at the river. And if the river is clear, you'll know we won if the water is clear. But if the water is brown, it will be stained brown with our blood, and you'll know that we lost." So the girl thought it was a bit strange, but she waited till the same time the next day, and she walked down beside the river, and there was the river rushing and tumbling, brown in colour. And ever since then, there have been no fairies seen in that glen, and the name of the glen till this day is Glen Dun, which in the Irish language means the brown glen. And the village that I took Senham to, people can ask her that when she gets to Marrakesh, is called Cushendun. Cush means foot, Cushendun, the foot of the brown river. And so that story is linked very much to the place. Now, one of our best storytellers lives in Cushendun, and when Christine was doing a course, Stephen O'Hara was one of the teachers on that course. I was a teacher as well. And Stephen O'Hara is an excellent storyteller. But I'm going to tell you a true story. And this is absolutely true. A long time ago, Despina, a long time ago, when Stephen was just 19 years old, his brother bought a new house in the town I'm telling you about, in Cushendun. And they bought a new house, lovely house. But when they looked outside in the garden, a tree had fallen over from next door, and it was crushing their fence. So they went very politely to the next door neighbours and said, "Excuse me, could you cut that branch of the tree?" And they said, "No, we're not touching it." They said, "Why?" "Because it's a fairy tree." And again, for people in Marrakesh or people from Australia or people from Scotch, people know this. Despina knows it because she's been here often enough. We have these fairy trees. If you see an old hawthorn tree standing in the middle of the field all by itself, you think, why did the farmer not cut that tree down? You mustn't cut that tree down because that's a fairy tree. That's where the fairies live. So they wouldn't cut it down. So they asked everybody in the village and nobody would cut it down. But our Stephen was 19. You see, when you're 19, don't know if there's anybody listening who's now, when you're 19, you're invincible. There's nothing you can't do. Stephen said, "Give me the saw." And he sawed the tree. Nothing happened, nothing happened, nothing happened, even though people say, "Oh, something terrible is going to happen if you cut down a fairy tree." But actually, by the end of the month, Stephen's bright red hair had started to turn white. And within about 2 months, he was completely white-haired at 19 years old. And if you met him now, if you look him up, pure white hair. And he really believes that he got away lucky, because sometimes you cut down a fairy tree, it can mean death or some terrible, maybe your cows will get killed or something will happen. So he reckons for a storyteller to have cut down a tree, that was a very bad thing to do, to cut a branch of a fairy tree. But that's a true story. And the reason I'm throwing that in is, as well as telling stories, I think it's really important we show where the story came from and what we believe. And when I go out, and again, it's one of the things I'll be doing next week in Marrakesh, if I'm in a school, I'll ask the children in the school, what superstitions do you have? I mean, for example, in Ireland, if we see a black cat, as I saw yesterday, crossing my path, in Ireland, that's considered very lucky. In America, apparently, it's not, which is an interesting thing for me. It's very lucky in Ireland. For example, other things you mustn't do, all sorts of things. You mustn't bring hawthorn into the house. That's a white blossom. Don't bring that into the house. If a frog comes into your house, very unlucky. If a bird flies into your house, very unlucky. And you could say, this is 2025. Who believes in that sort of thing? Well, hello, I do. And we have a black and white bird called a magpie. And we have a rhyme. If you see one for sorrow, two for joy, three for a girl, four for a boy, five for silver, six for gold, seven for a secret, never to be told. So if I see a magpie, I always greet that magpie. Very important that I greet it. Anyway, for the last many days, 3 days now, I have been telling stories to older people. And the wonderful thing is that sometimes the stories that you tell children are just as good for older people and vice versa. So I'll maybe tell you a story that I told the older people the other day. It's one of my favorite stories. And it's a story, I suppose, about storytelling. Lots of storytellers tell this story. But I'm doing a thing on, I think, Wednesday night called Kings, Queens, and Paupers. So I'm going to be telling stories about kings and queens and poor people. And this is a story about a king. And this king got to an age, I suppose he was 50 something, got to an age and he thought to himself, there must be more to life than this. So he had 4 daughters, so he called all 4 daughters and he said, girls, I'm going off to find myself. I want you to rule the kingdom and I want you to remember me while I've gone. And into each girl's hand he set a grain of corn. The first girl said, oh, Father, thank you so much. And she had a beautiful carved wooden box made with a red velvet lining. And she put the little grain of corn in it. She set it on the mantelpiece above the fire. It was the last thing she saw every night before she went to bed. It was the first thing she saw every morning when she got up. So she remembered her daddy. The second one, she just put it at the top of a cupboard in her bedroom. The third one just threw it away. And the fourth one studied it and studied it and studied it before deciding what to do. Years passed, the king came back, a new man. Earring, ponytail, jazzy shirt, completely changed. He called his 4 girls. He said, girls, come. What are the gifts that I gave you? The first one said, Father, I know exactly where it is. She brought it down. And this wizened up thing was sitting in the red velvet. She said, it's the last thing I see every night. It's the first thing I see every morning. Very good, he said. The second one had climbed up the wardrobe, blew off the dust and said, there you are, excellent. The third one, who was quite sneaky, had been to the kitchen, got another grain. And the fourth one, who was his favourite, said, I don't have it, Daddy. What? Is that all you think of your father? No, she said, I didn't know what to do with it. And I planted it. And the next year there was more corn. The next year there was more corn. And she pulled back the curtain. And there was this beautiful field of waving corn. Ah, he said, you know what to do with a gift. For a gift is surely just like a story. If somebody tells you a story, you don't say, oh, that's Liz's story. I couldn't tell that story. And you don't throw it up at the back of the wardrobe to gather dust. And you don't throw it away as if you haven't been here. No, if you like this story, find out a bit more about it. Perhaps you can tell it and tell it and tell it. And so this wonderful tradition of storytelling that we have continues and continues and continues. And that's very important. I hope you like that one. Oh, Baba C liked that one. Nice to see you. It'd be great to see you after 2 years, Baba C. A lot of water under the bridge since we last met. And I love, whenever I'm telling stories on Zoom, I love having the gallery view on so I can see who's there. I can see my friends listening. And last time I saw Dee was in Australia. And seems such a long time ago, such a long time ago. And that's the beautiful thing. I always think that storytelling is the original World Wide Web. It connects us, connects us, connects us. And the other day, I was at the storytelling event with Senem, and one of my friends, Sharon, started telling a story. And it was a story about her mother going to the market in Belfast. We have this wonderful market on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And every Saturday, her mother would go to the market and buy material. And at night, when Sharon and her sisters were in bed, they'd hear her mother's sewing machine going. And her mother would have 3 little dresses hanging for them to wear to church on Sunday. It was lovely. So I was into this story. I was big into it. I was into it really well. And then as the time went on, I thought, this is the tailor and the button. This is a story that many, many storytellers tell. But of course, she put her own touch to it. And that is the beauty of a storyteller. I love it. If a person hears a story of mine and they like it, I think, fine. but go and do your own thing with it. And that's what Sharon is, a particular skill. She does that all the time. She tells stories, but in her own particular way. And sometimes it takes a while before you find out what is your story. The other day in the school, they asked me what my favorite story was. And I said, right, I'll tell you that. And then I asked them what projects they were doing in the school. Well, one class, they were doing rainforests, so I told them a story about rainforests. Another class were doing Egypt, so we had a long discussion about Egypt. And the other class were doing a project on World War II. So I said, the strange thing is, I can tell you a story about World War II, and it's my favorite story at the same time. And by the way, I wasn't alive then, so it didn't happen to me. So this is my favorite story. I tell it both in schools for children and I tell it to adults. And if I was clever enough, I would show you something from that story that's over on my windowsill, but I'm not going to move. I'm just going to tell you the story. I am the youngest of 5 children. And I was born when my daddy was quite old. He was 50 years old when I was born. So my mum and daddy were older parents. And long before I was born, I'll have to stress that again, John, long before I was born, our family lived, we're colonies at the minute, in India. But they were in the part of India that is now part of Pakistan. It's the northwest frontier of India in those days. But nowadays, they were up in Rawalpindi and Murray, way up near the Khyber Pass. My father was a career soldier. My mother was there with my brother Billy, my brother Keith, and my sister Eva. Eventually, when their 2 years was done, they came down by train all the way down to a place called Mumbai, and there's a storyteller coming from Mumbai to the Marrakesh Festival. We called it Bombay. In those days, it was called Bombay. They boarded ships and they were heading back, coming to Northern Ireland. A whole convoy of ships, lots of ships. But the date was September 1939. And of course, a lot of people here will know that the Second World War broke out in September 1939. So they were in these big white ships. So the ships had to put into Mombasa in East Africa and Kenya to have camouflage paint put on them. And I asked the other day, what colour do you think they painted the ships? I'm sure Emily would know this answer. They were saying blue, green. I said, when did you ever see blue warships or green warships? No, they were painted battleship grey, so that if any planes came over and looked down with the grey sea, they'd be more camouflaged. While the men were painting the ships, the women and the children had picnics on the beach with fresh coconut, which was really beautiful, Mummy said. But my mummy was worried because my brother Keith was only 2.5 and he was too small for the children's life jackets. They had these children's life jackets, adult life jackets. So my mother used her old Singer sewing machine that I have over my windowsill, and she made a life vest for this little boy. She made it out of cork and nappies, because diapers, as Baba C would call them, diapers were made out of cloth in the olden days, not out of plastic. My mother also had a friend with a little baby of 6 months old, so she made a tiny life jacket for this baby. When they went back on the ships, our family went on a ship called the Britannia. The other family went on a ship called the Yorkshire. And the ships, if you know your geography, sailed up through the Red Sea, up through the Suez Canal, out through the Mediterranean, past Gibraltar, past Spain, past Portugal. And when they were off the coast of France, my brother was playing on the deck when he saw a torpedo shoot through the water and bang, hit the Yorkshire, which exploded and sank very quickly. Our family ship had to switch off all its engines because the German submarines, the U-boats, were listening underneath for noise. Mummy said she stood there in her hat and her gloves, without which no lady would ever even go out in those circumstances, holding these 3 children, praying that they'd get safely home. Well, obviously, people, you know I'm here, so you know they must have made it safely home. So they made it safely back to Northern Ireland, where my mummy stood in Armagh with all her possessions in army boxes. And she said, if ever I get a roof over my head, I'll never leave the house again. And you know what? She never did. She lived there until she was 92 years old. She never moved house. But when they got home, they heard all the tragic news about all the lives that were lost, because as we all know, war is dreadful. And her friend, the mother of the baby, sadly had drowned. But in those days, there was only one place to see the news. There's a couple of people on here would know where that was. It was the cinema. Pathé News, the newsroom. And there, on the screen in front of her, she saw survivors from those ships being brought to the shore. And on the screen, she saw a man carrying a tiny bundle. And it was the baby in the life jacket that she had made for him. So the baby survived, even though the mother didn't. And I love that story. I still love that story. I've recorded it lots, but the best bit came after. I told that story for years. And I had a friend who was planning a big event called World War II. What was it really like? And it was one of those occasions where people who are interested in history come, and they've all sorts of tanks and people dressed in American uniforms, because we had the American servicemen here, very popular with the girls, American servicemen, British, German, Italian, all the different. And I thought, I'll bring my mother, because I was hosting the evening. My daughter was a journalist. So we brought my mother, who was 90. We sat her down, and the evening went on, and finally I said, any questions? Excuse me. And I just know my mother's English accent. My mother's from Kent in England. So my mother started asking questions about the Belfast Blitz and all this. And the BBC were there, and they said, who's this woman? So I said, my mother. Claire went, my nanny. So they said, can we come and interview her? Because she was 92 and she was sharp as a tack. So they came and they interviewed her, and they put her on the internet. And you can look up her stories. It's Your Place and Mine. Nell Martin is her name. And that was all right. Time passed, and we got an email in from a Mrs. Olive James from England. And she said, I was that baby. My mother was drowned, and my father and I were rescued, and I was brought to Bordeaux. And I was able to tell that to my mummy just a few weeks before she died. And that's why it's really, really, really important to keep on telling your family stories, because those stories are really, really precious. I think that's very important to share those stories. So I hope you like that. Happens to be my favorite story. And it nearly makes me cry. It makes some people cry sometimes. So we're doing well. I've only about 10 minutes left of storytelling. If anybody wants to ask me anything, they can put, oh, thank you, Despina. You can put anything in the chat if you want to. Yeah, it's actually fun when you go online. It's called Your Place and Mine, BBC, Nell Martin. And you can look it up, and you see her picture as a young woman, and then you see her picture as an older woman, and she looks like me, or I look like her. And yeah. What if a toad shows up in your bucket when you pull it from oh, that could be a prince, Norman. That could be a prince. I have kissed many frogs in my time, is all I'm saying. And it hasn't worked out for me, I can tell you. But anyway, I'm going to do just a couple more stories. And again, sometimes children give me stories. And so I'm making no apologies for telling you a story that I got from a 7-year-old child. And I love it. I've adapted it a wee bit. So if you're going to tell it, well, acknowledge it maybe, that it's a wee bit different from the way I first heard it. A long time ago, I love to do this, when the world was new, there was a rainbow fairy. And she kept rainbows in a box on her kitchen table. Whenever the weather was right for rainbows, she'd just open the box and whoosh, the rainbow would glide out into the sky. When it was time for the rainbow to come back, she'd a magic whistle, she'd go, and the rainbow would come back in. But the poor rainbow fairy got the flu, like many people. Sore throat, sore head, temperature. She had to go to bed with a hot lemon drink. Very sensible. But unfortunately, next door to her, there lived a very nosy fairy. Now, I'm sure you people all know what nosy people are like. They're always looking behind the curtains or peering out from under the blinds, always watching other people's business. And the nosy fairy wondered something I'm quite certain some of you have wondered but never asked. What does a rainbow look like when it's not out? Are all the colours jumbled up like candy floss? Or I think you call that cotton candy, Norma. Or are they side by side like Play-Doh, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and stripes? So she knew the fairy was sick. She sneaked in. She opened up the shoom. Out came the rainbow, out into the sky. Whoosh. The rainbow fairy was, or the nosy fairy was saying, come back, come back. But of course it didn't come back because she didn't have the whistle. So she ran home and she hid. Now, next, next door to the fairy's house was the Queen's palace. And the Queen was sitting up there, the Queen of the fairies, eating her crunchy nut cornflakes, looking out the window, as you do. And she said, "What is a rainbow doing out in a day like this? This is not rainbow weather, it's a blue sky day." So she knocked on the door. The little voice said, "Come in, come in." Queen came in. "Rainbow fairy, come down at once." "I'm sorry, Queen, I'm sick." "Come down at once. It's your Queen speaking." So the rainbow fairy had to get out of bed and put on her slippers and her dressing gown, came down the stairs. The Queen said, "Your rainbow's out." She said, "But Queen, I'm often the sick. I'm not working today. It wasn't me." "Get it back." So she got her whistle and the rainbow came back. The Queen said, "Right, who did it? Was it you, John? Was it you, Norman? Desmond? Babasy?" She found the nosy one hiding under the table. "Come out." "I was only looking. I didn't mean any harm. I was only looking." "You're always looking at things that aren't your business. I'm going to give you a new job. Your new job is to go all around the world. Whenever you find a house with a boy or a girl sleeping, shh, don't wake them. Sneak in, lift up the pillow, and if there's a tooth there, leave money and bring that tooth back to me." So that is how the Tooth Fairy first started her job. And what I love about going to a multicultural festival like we're going to in Marrakesh is there'll be people there from lots of different nationalities, and I'll say, "What happens to teeth in your country? Does a little mouse take them? Do you throw them up on a roof?" Every country does something different. And I'm going to tell Despina, what do you do with teeth? What do you do in Greece with teeth?
We find a stone wall. We
Right?
put the tooth in a little space, in a little hole in between the stones, and say a little rhyme to the mouse who's going to get it. Because
Right.
we wish to have as strong teeth as mice have.
Yes, a lot of people. And sometimes I think it's Italy, a little mouse comes and takes it away. And in some places you throw them up. But I'm going to tell you, this is really true. People think I only tell stories that are made up. Not true. A lot of my stories are true. This is a true story. If you were to go over to Hampshire in England, there's a family there. The boy's called James and the girl's called Louise. Now, James and Louise are married now and have kids of their own. But when they were children, James was older. James kept losing teeth. And he kept putting the teeth under his pillow and he kept getting money. And he bought stickers and he bought magazines, and Louise was not happy. Louise spent all her time wiggling her teeth trying to get them out, but obviously they weren't ready to come out. So do you know what she did? And this is as true as I'm sitting here. She got a piece of white kitchen paper and she rolled it up very small and she put it under her pillow. And do you know what was there the next day when she lifted her pillow? You'll never guess. A note. It said, "Do you think I'm stupid?" Signed the Tooth Fairy. So after that, she just took her time. And she now has a wee girl of her own and she tells that story to her. I'm going to do a picture book about it one of these days, but I just love that story. And I love the fact that I have got a true story that I can tell you people. I'm going to do one more. It's lovely to see these friendly faces around the place. And hopefully there'll be people watching this, watching the recording or watching it online. That'll be nice to do. Do you know what I have to do now? I have to go and pack a big suitcase of all the stuff I'm bringing to America. I'm bringing a wonderful DVD called The Last Storyteller ? Which is about an old folklore collector who went round, one of the folklore people that went around collecting stories. And I showed it to Zuhair when he was visiting me. And we're going to show it, I think, next Thursday night for other people. And it dramatizes stories. It's a really good film. So I'm bringing a film with me. And I'm bringing lots of things for story sacks. So that should be interesting. So we'll finish up with one story, I think. What one will we do here? I know what we'll do. We'll do one about the planet. Again, it's a story from Here, There, and Everywhere. And well, you could do this. Actually, you can help me with it. What I need you to do is to be a thunderstorm. I need you to go sort of like, pow. Could we have a practice? Let's try. Babasy will do it anyway, like this. Pow. Good. A long time ago on the great continent of Africa, they say that in some places the sky was so low you could reach up your hand and touch it. And you could break bits off and you could eat it. It could come in any flavour. Strawberry, mango, pineapple. It was lovely because, you know, they didn't have to kill any animals. They were happy about that. And it didn't matter if it rained too much or didn't rain enough. There was plenty for everybody. But of course, people are people. Some people were very, very greedy. Some people would go out and they'd break off huge bits of sky and then they couldn't eat it. So they throw it in the rubbish heap, and the rubbish heap got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until one night, get ready, there was a terrible thunderstorm. Everybody sat up and they heard a voice that said, tell your people to stop wasting me. If you don't stop wasting me, you'll see what will happen. People said, oh, it's the voice of the sky. So from then on, people just nibbled tiny bits. But you know, and I know, you do know, you always get somebody who spoils things for other people in any circumstance. The woman's name was Adisi, and she was so greedy. She always wanted more and more and more. And one night after dinner, she did a perfectly decent dinner. She still felt hungry. And she sneaked out and she broke off a huge bit of sky and she started eating it. And she couldn't. Of course she couldn't. So she called her children and said, come and help, come and help, come and help. They were going, no, we're full, we can't eat it. So she thought, it's dark. She sneaked out. She threw it in the rubbish heap. Well, that night, are we ready? There was a thunderstorm to end all thunderstorms. Everybody sat up, but no voice came, and they went, whew, that was a cool thing. But the next morning, when they walked out, the first thing they could feel was the hot sun burning down on their heads. And when they looked up, there, far above them, was a beautiful blue sky. And that, as you know, is where the sky has stayed ever since. And I'm hoping come Sunday evening when I get there, or probably Monday morning before I see the sun, when I go out and look up, I'll see that beautiful sky up above me over Marrakesh. And I'm hoping you love that story, because what's it about? It's not really about the sky. Sure, it's not. It's about sharing what we have and not wasting too much of the earth's wonderful resources. So that's my story. I hope you've enjoyed listening tonight. I can't wait to be with a lot of the people that are online tonight. It would be a lovely thing to do. There's things in the one place. I think that's what it is. Thank you very much, people in the World Storytelling Cafe. Thank you, Norman, Donald, Despina, Baba C. Good to see you. Hello, everybody. How are you? Hello there in the far corner.
Thank you.
I'll see you, John. All being well. Probably not.
Thank you, Liz. That was amazing. Big round of applause for Liz. Woo.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
What's coming up? What's coming up? Well, there's obviously loads of things next week. Loads of things online, going to be online. You can't join like this, but it will be on. We will be.
Good. Will Masako be able to be involved, John?
Pardon?
Will Masako be able to be involved? Our Masako.
We'll work away. We'll work
That'll
away.
Be good.
And but right now, what's live from the cafe next Friday? Michael Currens. I can't remember whether he's doing a set of his own or whether he's leading us on a story round, but that's what's going to be happening next Friday. I'm looking at my diary and it's got Michael Curran's name on there.
Good.
What I've asked him to do, I can't remember what I asked people to do 5 minutes ago.
I know.
Brilliant, but it's been great. Looking forward to seeing you, Liz. Everyone else, Louis, everyone else who's been here, fantastic. See you either in Marrakesh or online.
Okay, Desmond, bye-bye.
Thank you once more, Liz.
Bye, Donald.
See you later.
See you.
Yeah. I love all the stories.
It's okay. It's okay. Leave me.